This is a government document from the London Borough of Camden. It is decades old. Typed paragraphs, handwritten corrections, and a hand-drawn map of a few streets. An artificial intelligence built for the British government read this file, worked out what it meant, and turned it into clean digital planning data in about 40 seconds. A council officer doing the same job by hand can lose an hour and a half to a single file. And England's councils are sitting on hundreds of thousands of files like it.
Those files are one reason it takes about 8 weeks on average for an English council to decide something as small as a kitchen extension. Before an officer can say yes, they have to check what rules apply to that exact address. Conservation areas, protected trees, restrictions written before most of the staff were born. The records exist. They're just buried in archives, scanned PDFs, and filing cabinets, and someone has to go dig. So in June 2026, the United Kingdom started what may be the first serious everyday test of AI government. The experiment is not an AI politician or a machine that rules. It is a set of narrow tools that take over the paperwork of the state, while humans keep the decisions. The tool that read that Camden memo is called Extract. It was built by the government's own AI unit with Google DeepMind's Gemini model, and it is now available free to every local planning authority in England. In its first weeks, around 50 councils were already using it, and more than 1,000 documents had been processed, most of them tree preservation orders. One officer in Medway said a single order used to take roughly 90 minutes to handle by hand. The government estimates that doing this across England could free up hundreds of thousands of officer hours a year. That estimate is the government's own, and it has not been independently tested. But anyone who has ever retyped a scanned table by hand will recognize the problem it is solving. The second experiment goes further. In 3 councils, Barnet, Camden, and Dorset, a prototype is being tested on live planning applications. It triages incoming cases, gathers the documents, summarizes objections from neighbors, finds the local policies that apply, and drafts an initial assessment with citations for the officer to consider. Applications like house extensions make up roughly 70% of a planning officer's workload. The government's target is to cut the average decision from 8 weeks to 4. On paper, the line of responsibility is clean. The AI prepares, the human decides. Every assessment is reviewed and approved by a qualified planning officer before any decision goes out, and the system records its work at each step, so there is an audit trail behind every case. That is the arrangement the whole experiment rests on, and it sounds like the obvious safe answer. But look closer at that line, because it is blurrier than it sounds. The machine chose which case the officer sees first. It gathered the evidence. It picked which policies to cite. It wrote the first words the officer reads. The human still decides, but they are deciding inside a frame the machine built. Officers under time pressure, with backlogs and targets, have every incentive to agree with a draft that looks right. Every profession that has tried this has a name for the failure mode: the rubber stamp. The planning profession has raised a second worry: where the next generation of judgment comes from. A junior planner learns the job by doing the boring parts, reading 100 messy files, discovering how policies conflict, noticing which objections actually matter. If the machine does all of that, the officer of 20 years from now may sign decisions built on instincts they never had the chance to develop. Parliamentary committees reviewing the government's AI push have made a similar point. The ambition has to be matched by investment in skills and oversight, or councils end up dependent on systems nobody left inside them can check. The British government's own rulebook already says what keeps this legitimate. Automated systems that assist an accountable officer must be explainable in plain English. High-impact uses need a human genuinely in the loop,
not just a signature at the end. Responsibility stays with the public body, never with the vendor. And residents keep every right they already had to see the record, to object, to appeal. None of this is exotic. It is the ordinary machinery of accountable government, extended to cover a machine. Whether councils can actually run that machinery is a separate question. Survey work across English local government found most responding councils already using or exploring AI. But the same evidence lists the barriers: money, staff skills, data protection reviews that take months, and systems that do not talk to each other. In an earlier trial, 25 councils tested Minute, a government AI that writes up meetings, across social care, planning, and housing. It saved real time, and the councils reported that the slow part was not the technology. It was governance and assurance, proving the tool was safe to use. There is also the question of who builds it. The planning prototype is a partnership with Google DeepMind, Google Cloud, and the consultancy Faculty, under a contract worth around £8 million. When a core function of the state runs on one company's models, procurement rules, transparency registers, and the ability to switch suppliers stop being paperwork details. They become part of what democratic control actually means. So here is where this could go. What exists right now is real but small. One document tool live across England. One decision support prototype in 3 councils, with its first phase wrapping up in the summer of 2026, and a decision about expanding to around 10 more councils after that. What is plausible within a few years? Routine applications decided in half the time, planning records any resident can search in plain language, and public consultations that are actually read in full because a machine did the reading. The thing people picture first is still science fiction, an AI that decides who gets to build. Nothing in this system decides. The moment one does, it stops being administration and becomes power without an author. One more plausible turn is worth naming. If residents and developers start using AI to write objections and applications, and councils use AI to read them, local democracy could drift into machines writing to machines, with people reduced to spectators of their own participation. Nobody is planning that. It is simply where the incentives point, if no one keeps watching the boundary between assistance and substitution. So, can AI fix City Hall? It can clearly fix part of it. The paperwork, the searching, the retyping, the 8 weeks of silence after you submit a form. That part is broken. Everyone involved agrees it is broken. And a machine that reads a 40-year-old file in 40 seconds is a real repair. But trust in City Hall was never about the filing. It rests on a named, accountable person, someone who lives under the same rules they enforce, making the call and answering for it. The UK experiment succeeds if it keeps that boundary visible while everything around it gets faster. Watch those 3 councils. Within a year, this stops being a prediction and becomes a report card.